Hello everyone and welcome back to JB's Total Gaming. It's been a while since I've done an indie game roundup, so to make up for it, we're going to have 10 indie games to bring to you today that you may be interested in. The first game we're looking at is called Kingdoms and Castles. It is $10 on Steam right now, and this is kind of a community building game, a town building game. There are management aspects where you have to collect resources, use those to build buildings, make sure you have enough storage for the resources, expand out, and there is an element of enemies attacking you eventually, and you do have to also build up an army for defense. As you can see, some of the buildings burning. There are Vikings and even a dragon that will attack eventually. Here's what I have to say about this game. It is not the most complex, difficult, or in-depth of these games. A game like Banished may be something I would point you to if you're interested in that. However, if you've played some of these more difficult games and they're a little too difficult for you, a little too much to manage, this might be worth checking out. Or this might be a good entry-level point to this sort of game if that sort of gameplay is something that sounds interesting to you. Next up is Kingsway. So this is a really interesting game, also $10. So it has kind of a Windows 3.1 vibe going on in the background, and it's kind of a role-playing game where you have these different windows open for inventory and this and that, and then monsters you're fighting. You can see there's a lot of windows that can be open at one point, and as you're playing the game, the combat may be pretty simple. Maybe you click on this to attack or whatever, but there's all kinds of little weird gimmicks like the screen of what you're doing combat moving around as you're playing the game. So you may have to get other windows out of the way and things like that in order to attack. This is a game I've heard very mixed things about. Some people really, really like it. Some people say the gimmick is more interesting than the game itself, and the gimmick isn't enough to sell it. However, if that's something that sounds interesting to you, if you're old enough, if you're as old as me and remember, simple, DOS-based games or, games like this, then maybe this has a nostalgia factor. And like I said, it's very mixed, but I think it's a pretty interesting concept, and I like that it's doing something different. And that's why I wanted to bring it up. And for some people, that could be something that's really enjoyable, as long as you enjoy the gameplay along with the gimmick. Next up is the Escapist 2, which is currently $20 on Steam, and it is obviously the follow-up to the Escapist. So basically how this game works is you are a prisoner and you're trying to escape. You can play with other people as well in order to work together and try to get out. What's really interesting about this game is that there's a lot of different potential ways to do it. There are different prisons with different challenges and things like that you can try to get out of. And you come up with a plan and try to execute it, whether you're going through the wall and using a poster to cover it, Andy Dufresne style, whether you're trying to get out through vents in the laundry or whatever, all kinds of stuff. And there's a whole language to the game that may take a while to learn. There's crafting in it, gathering resources. There's certain events you need to be at or else you'll raise the alarm, or certain things that you do that might raise the awareness level against you. But the whole point is to try to figure out the language of the game and find interesting and fun ways to escape. Some people are kind of annoyed when you start off, your character can really do almost nothing. So almost every time you start, you have to build up your strength and your intelligence through these mini games. The strength mini games are exceedingly simple, and the intelligence mini games pretty much involves reading a book and your energy going down while you're doing that, and that's it. So that can be a little bit frustrating. However, this game does not have degradation where your stats go down over time like the first game did. Some people may really like that, so you don't have to constantly going back and work out while you're trying to do all these other things and to get to the things you have to be at and do your escape plan. While some people may have liked that, it provided a little bit more challenge. It is a little bit more polished game. There is more things that you can do, and overall it's something that I think could be pretty fun as solo, or in particular playing together with another person. So there you go, there's a look at the Escapist 2. Next up is Redeemer. So Redeemer is a super violent game, so if that's not your thing, then you definitely want to stay away from it. It has an opening sale right now, 15% off. The normal price is $15. And Redeemer is ultra violent. It has melee combat, it also has range combat. There is weapon degradation, your weapons run out of ammo and things like that, so you're switching back and forth between the two. And there are some minor issues with it, but overall for an indie game, this looks really solid, and from what I've been able to see in reviews, and that it plays pretty solid too. And well, if this sort of thing interests you, the super violent, the cool fighting, and it's a little bit more in depth than you might expect from a top down as far as the fighting goes, then this looks like a really fun game that might be worth checking out for $15 or a little bit less on sale right now. Alright, The End is Nigh. Now, The End is Nigh is kind of a spiritual successor to Super Meat Boy. If you're not familiar with Super Meat Boy, it was a very, very difficult platformer where there's all kinds of things on the screen that can kill you, and in order to get through, you have to time your jumps perfectly and figure out different... And it's super difficult. And one nice thing about these style of games is as soon as you die, you restart a level. Now, this one has some differences from Super Meat Boy, the way some of the levels work, the way things shift around, and actually it matters what angle you come into a room from. And there is kind of a meta game behind it as well. So basically, if that sounds something fun to you, something that is incredibly frustrating but unsatisfying to get through, my understanding from what I've heard, as while this game may start off a little bit easier than Super Meat Boy, it's actually maybe harder overall, especially if you want to complete everything, because of course there's more to do after you beat the game. This is that sort of game, and either it's something that's going to interest you, that you want to challenge yourself with that very difficult platforming, or that sounds terrible. And that's kind of how I feel. However, if you're interested in that super difficult platforming, this is from the same designer, and it's got a lot of polish to it and good controls. The controls are a little bit different. Some people were used to Super Meat Boy, were frustrated by the way the right trigger works. That's a whole complicated thing. But overall, if you're interested in very difficult platformers, then I definitely recommend this. Now, Fidel is kind of a rogue-like game more than a roguelite game. Why do I say that? It's almost kind of turn-based. And if you're not familiar with those terms, don't worry about it. Basically, you're probably going to die a lot and then you start over. Now, the original Rogue game was turn-based, and this is kind of turn-based in that it's actually a puzzle game. There isn't really combat in it. You basically move a square every turn. The goal is to defeat as many monsters as you can, and the bigger strings of monsters you get, the more experience you get, and then get through the level with at least a certain amount of experience, level up, get more health, and things like that. But it is definitely a puzzle game, and one thing I should warn you about is that while it is a puzzle game and you can take a little bit of time to sit and think about the best way to get through a room, well, don't take too long, because there's a ghost that ends up following you along your trail and basically killing you if you take too long. Now, the other interesting thing is you can't go back on your path also. So not only is it a puzzle game where you have to figure out the best combination of taking out monsters without dying once you understand the rules of the monsters and the pickups and the things like that, but you also have to avoid crossing over your own trail. So it's a pretty difficult game. Same as before, though, you die in a room, you just start over on that room instead of starting over the whole game, which is kind of nice because that would be way too difficult in this. And if that sounds interesting to you, I've heard a lot of people say this is more fun than it looks, but you have to be prepared for that style of gameplay, dying a lot and having to figure out these puzzles within a relatively brief amount of time, trying to maximize your combinations and your experience. Alright, to all my board gamer people out there, Antihero is a digital board game and is not available in a physical copy. This is a board game designed specifically to be played on PC or console or something like that. So it's a game where you control a master thief. You're going around the map trying to gather resources. You're hiring people to do things for you, to go into buildings and to gather resources for you, thugs to act defensively, and basically trying to get the most victory points. You have a victory point goal that you're trying to get to, and you can get that through different means, assassinations, through bribing, which just involves getting a lot of money. So it's a really interesting game and pretty well done. You can play it online against other people, and there is a campaign mode as well. And if that sounds interesting to you, then I definitely suggest checking it out. Again, this is specifically for people that enjoy board games. If you're not into designer board games, kind of modern board games, this may be a little much. But then again, if you like kind of turn-based strategy, you may end up really enjoying this, which might even open the door to checking out some more board games. It's overall pretty well done. It's $15. It's got a lot of polish. It's got a good look. And there's cool, interesting things like a tech tree that you buy things on, and you can also use money to hire people. And overall, I think it's a pretty good looking digital board game. Alright, Slime Rancher. Slime Rancher is kind of a, I don't want to call it farming management sort of thing. You're basically going around exploring this place and gathering slime. You then use this slime in order to not really breed them, but produce this substance that you can sell, and then build up your ranch. And you eventually find all these different sort of interesting slimes to try to collect. You have to feed them, use the resources they produce to get money, build up your farm as you go to get money. So there's a bit of exploration. There's a bit of economics, although it's very light on that, and a bit of management, although it's pretty light on that. Overall, to me, the selling point of this game is the art style. I think it's a very cute game, and if you like the idea of exploring this island that can end up looking very repetitive and you can easily get lost on, and you have to get back to your ranch at certain points, which can be annoying, and it's not a very deep as far as the management goes and not a very long game. With all those caveats in mind, it is still, a game that is potentially pretty fun and interesting, especially if you enjoy the art style and just have fun doing kind of a more laid back, relaxed style of gameplay. And speaking of laid back, relaxed style gameplay, let's talk about Yonder. So Yonder is a gorgeous game, and it is a game that is entirely about exploration. Why do I say that? There's no combat in the game, there's no fail state in the game. There are quests and things you can do, but they're mostly kind of just fetch quests that aren't really that interesting. Basically, your ship crashes on this island, and it's got this evil stuff coming over it. And your goal is to eventually, defeat this stuff and bring it back so the island is no longer corrupted. And there are little things you can do along the way. And, there's resource management and inventory management and things like that. But the whole point about this game is it's a pretty experience. It's all about exploring. There are characters you meet along the way. You may find the story interesting, you may not. But a super chill game. So keep that in mind if you want something with, combat and things like that. There's none of that going on in this game. But for people who are just looking for a really chill experience, and this might be something you enjoy. Alright, last up, the 10th game, The Long Dark. So this is a game that started in early access quite a long time ago, but it is now released. And basically the real big difference between the early access game, and they have added things and different resources and things like that, and the current released version is that there is a story mode in the game. Now this is a survival game. Now here's the thing, this is kind of a pure survival game. Yeah, there are animals in the woods and things like that, you can do hunting, but it's not like a zombie survival game or like a horror survival game. It's just basically you got to deal with the elements, you got to deal with food, you got to deal with sleep and all of that, and with light and all kinds of things as you travel around, and you can do it kind of just in a survival mode or now in a story mode where you have an objective to get to and there's a story. I haven't seen all of the story. The story from what I've seen so far is pretty light, but it may get more interesting as you go. And if you had checked it out before, then hey, there's a story mode now. If you haven't and you're interested in a survival game that maybe isn't zombies or supernatural or whatever, that is kind of just about making decisions whether or not you need to rest and then face a potential blizzard in the morning or go out and get food tonight even though you're tired, things like that, then this is a game that should be pretty interesting to you. It is $35 normally, 10% off right now, so this is a much pricier game, but it is a pretty big production. Although the character models do look kind of a little bit wonky, it is a very pretty game and a pretty interesting game if you're interested in the survival genre. So thanks a lot for checking this out, everybody. We brought 10 indie games to you, and if this is something you enjoy, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Let other people know about this. It's something I try to do. We're a very small channel, but if there is a subset of people interested in new, interesting indie games coming out, and I try to get this out as often as I can to let people know about games. And if you appreciate that and know someone else appreciates that, be sure to let them know so that we can so they can check out the channel. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and we'll talk to you again soon.